We held a run last week. It was called the Polar Bear Run, and you may have seen some posters on campus. Basically what we want to do is we want to get people that are involved in kinesiology involved with other degrees on campus. So essentially, if anyone's in pre-med, dentistry and so forth, sort of mixing exercise with a bunch of those professionals and creating those relationships. So exercise can be used in the future as a treatment. We have a number of opportunities for people to get involved and volunteer in the club. And we also have a number of events. We're going to host a speaker series and probably mix it in with some exercises and so forth. But if you guys have any questions, I'll be here. My name is Ariel. I am the president of the club, and you're more than welcome to ask me any questions.
Down for us.
All right.
So, my name is Daniel Perlis. It's on the slide. I'm going to talk a little bit about my background, my research. I'm not going to stay on it too long. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about preparing yourself to get into a career in health research, or what types of things you can do after doing grad school in kinesiology. I know you guys are mostly undergrads, so I'm going to talk also a bit about actually getting into grad school and what that is like. So I think you got a really good idea of what a career path can look like. So I'm not going to talk too much about my own background, but I have been here at York forever. I've been here for 13 years. I did my undergraduate degree here, then I did a master's here, and now I'm in the final year of my PhD. And for over the time that I've been here, I've done work in a lot of different areas. For those of you that know our supervisor of the Ripple Lab, we do a lot of diverse research. So my master's work was about walkability and physical activity for women in Jane Finch. So it was a project where I was doing door-to-door work for surveys, and it was an epidemiological project. We were understanding practically what people were actually doing. And my PhD work is about bioethics. It's understanding how people, what people's opinions and responses are to pandemic influenza issues. Things like, how do we distribute limited resources in a pandemic? Who gets, care first? What are the responsibilities of the doctors and nurses, et cetera, et cetera. Some of the other educational background I've done, I did a diploma for in health services and health policy research through the Ontario Training Centre for Health Services and Policy Research. I have done a health psychology diploma here at York. I completed the teaching assistant certificate in teaching program, and I keep up with a lot of other courses on in vivo SPSS, and I'm going to talk more about how you guys can do these sorts of things later. So as well as having been a TA here at York for a lot of years now, I've also done several contract positions at Cancer Care Ontario. I've done 2 different contract positions at the University of Toronto, and of course a wide variety of contract positions through my supervisor working on grants here at York. This is my current list of publications. So basically, as you go through your master's and your PhD, the more projects that you work on, the broader that you get, the more opportunities that you have to be involved in these projects. So, there's only 2 there that I'm actually the lead author from, which was my master's work. But because I've been involved in so many different teams and projects, I have gotten opportunities to be involved in other things. So, I'm going to hang out on this slide for a while. Coming out of grad school, there are a ton of different ways that you can go for the future. So we have, these are some very, very general ideas. You can work in academia, you can work for the government, you can work in industry, you can work for agencies or institutions. So academic careers. When I'm talking about an academic career, I'm talking about post-secondary education, so either a college or a university position. Now, mainly thinking of university-style academic position, you have some of the pros. You have the potential for a very long career, which is good because it takes a really long time to get started. If you want to teach at the university level, almost always you're going to need a PhD. Otherwise, you're going to be relegated to contract faculty positions. So much like the part-time positions that have tend to be the way into working at college, nowadays the ways that you get into working as a professor in a university is a very, very difficult process. So there are positions called contract faculty where you may just have one semester worth of job security at a time. And the tenure track faculty, which is what people think of when they think of, Professor X that has been here forever, those positions are extremely difficult. They only might open one every several years, and typically there'll be several hundred PhDs applying for each one of those. So you need to be the best out of a couple hundred PhD graduates in order to get one of these positions. And in order to really even be on the radar of these people, you need to constantly be publishing. You need to constantly be getting research funding. And so it's a very, very difficult process. Now, once you make it through that door, you have the stability of a really long career. You can do really innovative work. You can apply for research grants and push the boundaries of knowledge in whatever area that you're passionate about. And it really gives you a lot of freedom in the sense that you're going to be teaching only about 20% of your time. Then probably about 60, 70% of your time will be research, and the last 10, 20% is what's called service, where you work on committees, you supervise students for their thesis and that kind of stuff. Now, the obvious downsides, aside from what I mentioned about how difficult it is to get in, is that it takes a long time. You're going to be miserable for a really, really long time, and you're not going to have any free time until you're very old. Tell us more. Yeah. I'm getting really excited. Now, talking about academia, one thing I'll never forget. This was quite a few years ago when I was doing my master's. We had a conference come, and we had a faculty member who I'd worked with before come and give a talk about the experience of working as a professor. And the way that she said this was so earnest and almost happy that it made me very, very sad inside. So what she said is, the great thing about going into academia is you have so much freedom that, if you prefer to work, from 9 to 7 on Monday to Friday, you could do that and just, do your readings when you're at home at night. Or you could just work 6 days a week. You could just work 9 to 5 Monday through Saturday, and you have so much freedom. So there is a lot of work involved in academia, and it's not for everybody. But if you're really passionate about the work that you're doing and you're excited, it's not something that typically you would just start out in your undergrad thinking, yeah, I know what I'm going to do until I'm 40, that's fine. But it's just to give you an idea of what the trajectory is like. Okay. So working for government. Now, this is mainly where I'm looking to head, because my background in health policy and health services research. So some of the great benefits is that it's great long-term prospects. Government jobs have great pension, great benefits, solid salary. You're not going to make as much as a professor would, but you make good money. And you have the possibility to be working with implementation. So say you're doing health research as an academic, when it comes time to say, okay, well, we need to come up with a new program to incentivize, healthy behavior. We're going to do, a fitness course tax credit for people. Well, you could be involved in the process of implementing that and designing these new ways when government is trying to improve health. You'd be involved in that. Now, the cons, obviously, if you're working for the government, they're political considerations. I don't know how many people are familiar with Insight. Insight, it's a heroin treatment program based out of Vancouver. Okay, so what they did was they got a clinic and they staffed the clinic with a doctor, some nurses, and social workers. And they gave drug addicts free needles. They took their old needles and gave them a room to go sit in to get high. This sounds crazy. It was one of the most effective public health interventions that they've ever done with this population. It meant that if somebody overdosed, they were right there with medical professionals. It meant that if you took, an average person who was reusing needles and sharing needles that could have been, communicating hepatitis, HIV, other diseases to the other drug users in the community, they were using clean needles. They were protected. Because the tremendous costs of managing, even one drug addict over the course of many hospital visits and things like that is so high, this program was amazing. It saved a ton of money, it made people suffer less, and it had less mortality, less costs. It really seems like a win-win. The Conservative government at the federal level was furious about it. It was really against their worldview, their ethics, their approach to health, said that they didn't want this to happen. So they repeatedly tried to shut it down by cutting funding. They managed to hold on to that. They went to court to try and force them to shut it down, and eventually they lost. But it means that whatever work you want to do, you need to be under the consideration of what is the current politics. So, anybody who's working in climate science in Canada right now, if you're not familiar with it, is in a lot of trouble. It's very difficult. You can't communicate your findings without going through, 8 levels of government before